I profoundly accept this nomination for President of the United States.
The U.S. President Donald Trump makes his case for 4 more years. We will take a look at the Republican National Convention and what we can expect if he gets reelected. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Caleb, sitting in for Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Hi, everyone. It was a long speech lasting more than an hour. The U.S. President Donald Trump promised to rebuild the economy, to develop a vaccine against the coronavirus, and end the demonstrations around the United States. But most of the time was devoted to attacking his Democratic rival.
Joe Biden is not a savior of America's soul. He is the destroyer of America's jobs. And if given the chance, he will be the destroyer of American greatness.
After Trump's speech, a fireworks display lit up the nighttime sky here in Washington, D.C., closing out the Republican National Convention. The president is already in full campaign mode, hosting a rally in New Hampshire this Friday night. The election in the United States is scheduled for November the 3rd. Okay, to talk about all this, we're going to bring in our panel. Mary C. Curtis is a columnist for the political publication Roll Call, and she joins us from Charlotte, North Carolina. The Democratic strategist Joel Rubin joins us via Skype from Chevy Chase, Maryland. And in New York, John Burnett. He's the managing director and founder of One Empire Group. And Einar Tangen, he is a current affairs commentator joining us from Beijing. Got up early for us this morning on a Saturday, and we greatly appreciate it, Einar and all of our guests. John, I want to begin with you. What we saw last night was, again, Donald Trump wrapping himself in the red, white, and blue. But this RNC was very different for a number of reasons. One, no platform. And instead of really touting what Trump had done the past 4 years, he spent a great deal of time attacking his rival. What did you think of that, and why make that argument at that point in time?
Well, as you stated, he spoke for an hour, so we covered several different things. But let's not forget, as the president said, this is the most important election possibly in our lifetime. So, of course, he has to draw a contrast between him and his policies and Biden and what Biden wants to do. Biden did the same thing in his speech, right? So when you look at it, and look at the RNC convention as a whole, Monday through Thursday, remember, it's supposed to have taken place in Charlotte, then in Jacksonville, Florida. Mm-hmm. Then what you saw all week. If anything, GOP hit it out the park based upon the level of expectation. And when you look at the speakers, when you look at the fact that they had a single white female who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, a gay man that was a Bernie Sanders supporter, black people who are actually Democrats, all saying why they're voting for Trump and giving reasons for it. That was really dynamic. He picked everyone from every socioeconomic status. There was even geographical dispersion, right? Everyone had their own message, and everyone spoke to America. Then Donald Trump came in and said, you know what? If that wasn't enough for you, let me draw the contrast and what I will do in a second term.
Okay, Joel, I want to pick up with you. The last time we really talked at length was back in 2016 at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. I want to get your take on Trump's speech last night. And do you think that's accurate, that Trump hit it out of the park and that people are talking about it today in terms of contrasting the way they would lead, or was this just doom and gloom versus what I can do with 4 more years?
Yeah, Sean, it's great to be with you and great to be with you again in this discussion. It was a snooze. It was teleprompter Trump. It had low ratings. It had less eyeballs on it than Joe Biden's speech, than Kamala Harris's speech even. the vice presidential nominee for the Democrats. So Americans really weren't interested in this. And despite all of the use of taxpayer dollars, of the people's house as a backdrop in an unprecedented and unethical, illegal manner, Donald Trump brought up every stop he could, and people really didn't want to hear it because Americans are tired of what he has to say. And I think that going to the point of the fact that they don't have any new ideas, that this platform is completely devoid of anything. For the first time in the history of the Republican Party, there is no new policy platform being presented by their nominee. That's a disgrace for American politics and American public policy. And I think we saw it in effect on those speeches where there was no substance to it. And even for the people who support Trump, they have to come out scratching their head as to how can a president be arguing that his opponent, Joe Biden, is going to destroy the country when the country is in shambles right now under his leadership. We've lost millions of jobs on net. Our economy is broken. We have social chaos in the streets on this president's watch, and he's doing nothing but exacerbating those problems. So he can make all the PR he wants. He can put all the speakers that he thinks represent certain groups, even though they don't bring any constituencies with them. But it really wasn't convincing. And just one last thing to mention, if I may.
Hang on, John. Let Joel finish his point. We'll get to you in a second.
Thank you. We had just a day or so ago, more than 100 former staffers to John McCain, the former standard bearer of the Republican Party, saying that they would support Joe Biden. That's a constituency. There's nothing like that for Donald Trump on his side regarding Democrats.
John, go ahead and make your point.
See, people like this person actually blames Donald Trump for people in his own party going out, burning down buildings, burning down businesses, and when Donald Trump wants to restore order for many people that are defenseless because Democratic leadership is withdrawn from the violence, then he blames Donald Trump for wanting order.
That's totally gaslighting.
John, I'd like to say something about that.
Hang on, please, everybody. John, I see where you're going with that. Donald Trump has had many times where he could have come out and said, yes, my policies could have led to some of this, but he has refused to do that. I want to go to Mary Curtis now. Mary, before we get to your point, I would like to play a brief clip from last night that I think is going to lead into perhaps the point you would like to make.
Make no mistake, if you give power to Joe Biden, the radical left will defund police departments all across America. They will pass federal legislation to reduce law enforcement nationwide. They will make every city look like Democrat-run Portland, Oregon. No one will be safe in Biden's America.
Okay, firstly, Mary, before we get to your point, Joe Biden has never come out and said that he wants to defund police. That's something that has been fact-checked time and time again, but Trump continues to make this point. Mary, I'd like to pick up on you. How do you counter something like this when Trump can use this platform, go out and talk about violence in the streets and how Democrats are really fanning the flames without accepting any responsibility from his administration?
Well, I would say that he says law and order, but he defines it in a very narrow way. You see him mainly talking about supporting police, and as you say, Joe Biden wants to give more money to police departments, but he doesn't talk about police reform and the violence of police toward communities of color, which is really how this all started. He didn't mention George Floyd, he didn't mention Mr. Blake, and he didn't mention the police part in violence. He also didn't mention the fact that the people killed and wounded in Kenosha were three protesters, and the person who allegedly committed it, who's been charged, was a young white man and Trump supporter, and even the police officer that Mike Pence, the vice president, mentioned who was killed in California, it was from a right-winger. So his definition of violence is really quite narrow, and they had as a speaker the white couple from St. Louis that brandished weapons on marchers. And so I would say that what the Democrats could do to counter it is to say, what do you mean by violence? Who's causing it? Many of the right-wing provocateurs, he did not condemn that. So
I'd like to bring in Einar.
Did the Democrats?
Hang on just a second, please.
Look,
Einar, you've had a long time to watch
The
this,
propaganda.
what going on in China, and you're very well steeped in U.S. politics, spending a lot of time in Wisconsin. I know all that. How do you think people in China are, or internationally, are embracing what is going on in the United States right now?
Well, Sean, I mean, it's very simple. You know, this was a speech that was connected only by the lies that were told on an almost consistent basis, whether it was claiming credit for the wall, which there's only 25 real miles that has been completed. Everything else has been replacement miles, to Veterans Affairs, you name it, it's all there. But, you know, in the end, it's not about all of these things. We could spend a lot of time going over the details, and you're not going to convince anybody. It's really going to be about what comes out of this in terms of favorability. Biden's took a jump after his. We'll have to see what happens with Trump. But it's very clear. America is divided. We can hear it right here on this show. And in China, people are scratching their heads. They're kind of wondering, how is this possible? This has been a learning moment for not only China, but the rest of the world about American politics. They sit in front of the screen or hear the news on the television. Almost every single international press group has condemned Donald Trump for these massive untruths and his unwillingness to do them. You know, you said these are vetted concerns that have been completely discounted, yet he keeps saying them. So right now, it's fear and loathing on the campaign trail for Donald Trump, and the rest of the world is just watching. But as was said earlier, the ratings were down. He had approximately 2 million less viewers than Biden, and he spent almost 70 minutes, basically
exactly,
excoriating his opponent for, and he mentioned him 42 times. Interestingly, he only mentioned China 22 times, but it came in for a lot of abuse, and that's what people are seeing here.
John, I want to pick up with you because in Trump's defense, in terms of the numbers, there was a lot of breaking news going on that night. A major hurricane hitting the Gulf Coast, the events going on in Kenosha as well. So I don't look at ratings all that much, but I do want to talk about what Trump has been focusing on. And he said that Republicans have been using New York as an example of what went wrong in terms of Democratic leadership that has basically led to lawlessness in many major cities like this. I know that you have points that you'd like to make about this. Is Trump, though, being completely fair when he throws that analogy out there and saying that basically Joe Biden was going to be a Trojan horse and bring socialism to the United States?
Absolutely. You know, people always talk about President Trump and claiming that he's lying, that he lies. There's been more lies on this program by my fellow panelists than Donald Trump. And when you look at the violence that's taken place, babies being killed in strollers, right?
Yeah.
Black male fathers walking with their children being shot, right? When you look at Portland, businesses being burnt down, not just white businesses, but black-owned businesses, the very demographic that you're trying to help. And then you know what? Right here in New York, the city council that passed no bail, that passed crazy criminal justice reforms along with other economic devastating policies, a group of them finally came out and said, you know what? We do not need to defund the police. Why? Because many of their constituents are seeing violence skyrocketing in terms of shootings, in terms of violence, in terms of rapes, and different things of that nature. And they say, you know what? We don't want to defund police. We want to see more police. We just want those police reforms. And going back to what someone said in terms of Trump not being behind police reform, that is utterly ridiculous. The Democrats walked away from the table because they didn't get one thing out of the laundry list of things that both sides agreed upon. In fact, going into that piece of legislation, they had 70% agreement. No bill starts off with 70%.
Can we call time on this?
7-0 agreement. Well, there's lies being told about this president.
John, I think you've made your point, but I was letting you go on a long time because I think a lot of what you have said has been disproven, actually. In terms of defunding police, I think they're talking about, gentlemen, please, just everybody calm down just 1 second. Let me finish my point, then we'll move on. Joel, let me pick up to you. Let's kind of change gears a bit. I think that we've covered that pretty well. Trump promised to bring the American people together back in 2016. Without having a platform at the Republican National Convention this year, is it more of make America great again? What are we supposed to take away from this?
Well, to paraphrase a former Republican president, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Clearly, America is not. So what Donald Trump is trying to do is tell Americans, forget about the last 4 years. I promise this next time, I'll figure it out. I'll get it right. And he has no slogan beyond that. He has no platform. And that's what's really distressing, is that the Republican Party for decades has been a party of ideas, not ideas that I would always agree with. Certainly, as a Democrat, I would argue and debate them when I worked on Capitol Hill as a Senate aide and in the Obama administration. But at least there were ideas. Right now, there are no ideas. Trillion-dollar deficits, endless wars, where the president, factually, there are more American troops in combat zones today than when he took office. That is a fact. But he talked about it in the opposite terms last night. No real plan for ending the coronavirus pandemic. And Americans want to know what the plans will be. And that's why I think it's really just clear that Donald Trump can't run on ideas, because the ideas he's used the last several years have failed the United States. And so he goes on the attack against Joe Biden, who has ideas about how to get us out of this negative spin cycle that we're in, where essentially it's character assassination by Donald Trump against Joe Biden with a variety of falsehoods. They tried the Joe Biden is slow or hiding in the basement. Well, that failed because Joe Biden demonstrated he's anything but. So now they're going to other things. He's wolf in sheep's clothing. They'll try anything. How about debating the ideas? How about showing the policies? How about explaining how we're going to get out of the nightmare we're in?
Okay, let's calm down a second.
How about agreeing to debating?
Okay, John.
They're going to be debating 3 times.
Yeah, we'll get there. Pump the brakes. Mary, I'd like to talk to you about today being the 57th anniversary of MLK Jr.'s famous speech. And I had the pleasure of walking into work today, seeing a lot of peaceful demonstrators walking back after hearing that. Biden gave an interview yesterday accusing Trump of deliberately pouring gasoline on the fire of social unrest for his own political purposes. I had a chance to read a lot of your blogs and some of your most recent articles in Roll Call. Kind of bring us up to date on where you have been about this. You've had a pretty, I think, thoughtful, thought-provoking approach toward this.
Well, yes. I mean, I'm African-American woman. My 3 elder siblings were involved in the civil rights movement. I had a brother who was arrested twice for sit-ins called agitators. And so I think I see a lot of the echo of it when he talks about people invading the suburbs. I live in a neighborhood in Charlotte that had restricted covenants in the deeds that I could not have lived in. And he is going back to these fears. And you want to say, has America changed? You see this 57 years after Kamala Harris, the vice presidential nominee for the Democrats, spoke virtually. Who was speaking from the Trump administration for these peaceful folks coming, talking about freedom, jobs, education, reform, racial inequity? There is a way, as a conservative, you can do that. But, you see people lionizing, people on the right, pretty mainstream folks, lionizing this young man accused of the shootings in Kenosha. And so though you had more minorities on the stage than you have in the in the Republican administration, you wonder how much of that is show and how much he is really listening to the pain that people are feeling. I think if there is a way he could do that, but he is choosing not to, and he's going back to that Southern strategy. My parents were Lincoln Republicans who heard, Republican candidates talk about welfare cheats and bucks buying steaks, and they were appalled. They felt that they were betrayed by the Republican Party that didn't want them. But many Democrats are, African Americans and minorities can be very conservative and religious. They do want law and order. They just want it to be fair. They want to be treated as citizens, not perps.
John, let's talk about this because GOP strategist Michael Steele came out and criticized Trump's speech, basically said it just pandered to his base and didn't reach out to try to bring in new voters to Trump. Do you think that's indeed the case? And would Trump have made more points if he would have distanced himself from that shooter in Kenosha who killed 2 people and wounded 1 and is fighting extradition from Illinois to Wisconsin right now? Should he have done more?
I don't understand. Maybe you guys really didn't watch and comprehend the entire week. The speakers told their personal stories. That was the whole purpose of bringing these different individuals, black, white, Hispanic, people from different parts of the country.
Fair enough, but I'm talking about Donald Trump himself. He had an hour and 10 minutes last night.
You asked the question, wait for the answer.
Okay.
All right?
Sure.
So the point is, they talked about why they're voting for Trump, and they talked about the unique circumstances, and they talked about their connection to the party. On the other hand, you have Democrats constantly, even in this conversation, talk about peaceful protesting. Even while the whole metropolitan cities are being burnt down by arsonists.
I'm sorry.
Joel, hang on a second.
Going back
Joel, hang on a second.
Those individuals are using that level of fear to drive voting.
In that way.
Joel and John, both of you, please hang on one second. Firstly, John, you have not answered the question. I asked specifically about Trump.
Did.
Why did Trump not use any of that language in his hour and 10-minute speech? Not about what anybody else said, about the President of the United States saying where he wants to go.
I don't know why he didn't, but maybe because he's
Should he have? I guess is my point.
He's been saying it all along. And you guys are talking about the economy now. The thing that you don't want to talk about is pre-COVID, right? Because COVID is Joe Biden's real running mate. Because you actually Democrats relish in this current environment, right? Because you're talking about this current situation, not the policies that Trump espoused pre-COVID.
Sean,
and his ability to do it again.
There's a word for that. It's called projection. The president has led us into a situation of nearly 200,000 dead Americans, and somehow we're getting blamed for wanting this to be the situation. We don't want this. We want out of this. The president is trying to act like it's not happening. And let's talk about the economy. I'm happy to. Trillion-dollar annual deficits. Trillion-dollar annual deficits. We were in a recession in February before COVID hit. So you could run on the economy, but the economy was run into a ditch by Donald Trump. And I think it's really important to point out the 17-year-old murderer of those 2 protesters. This is like part of a pattern where Donald Trump, 2 days prior, put vigilantes on the RNC stage, 2 gun-wielding vigilantes who have been who committed an illegal act by waving their guns. And you think it's a surprise that 2 days later a vigilante goes out and kills 2 people? This is a president who retweeted QAnon anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
You know what's funny? They're Democrat. They were Democrats, right? And those people were actually on their property, threatening to do harm to their wife.
Mary, I'd like to move on, and I think that we've
been charged for a crime.
That's utterly ridiculous.
John and Joel, let's move on. We were talking about the coronavirus, the pandemic, and Mary, I want to get to you, but I want you to hear this soundbite first.
We have 3 different vaccines in the final stage of trials. Right now, years ahead of what has been achieved before. We're producing them in advance so that hundreds of millions of doses will be quickly available. We will have a safe and effective vaccine this year.
Could this be Trump's October surprise, if indeed there is some very positive news in working on the viruses? Mary, do you think that this could really benefit the president moving forward?
Well, it's definitely his intention to, but you have him coming out and speaking about this, and medical professionals, even some in his own administration, coming back afterwards and pulling him back a bit because they really have to go through the clinical trials. And he accuses them, when they say that, of playing politics and trying to hold back these treatments. But now I think so many people, I certainly would be doubtful of the first things that come out, because I'll be wondering, is this political or is it medical? And do you want to take that chance? And so, yes, I'm sure he wants to announce one as well, as Joel said, everybody wants to have a cure, and they want to have the vaccine, but he is making it political. He's politicized so much, from the Justice Department to our medical department. And, you know, black and brown folks, as usual, are been hit especially heavy in the economy, in COVID, and as a result of the racial inequities. And so, you know, he, as I said, he had a diverse group of people up there, but at the same time, when he is doing a naturalization ceremony for a bunch of folks, a couple of whom didn't know they were part of a televised convention, and some of them are from countries that he's also described with an expletive I couldn't even use on your program, that would seem to be very cynical and very political. And so, yes, people will be doubting a vaccine that comes, and everyone will be harmed by that.
Okay, Einar, I really want to talk to you, and I wish we've had more time on this, because the two largest economies on Earth pretty much have to be able to work together if the world's going to be lifted out of the economic doldrums. If Trump wins the presidency, what do you think it's going to be like moving forward with the United States and China?
Well, it'd be very difficult unless he changes tone. I mean, China was the whipping boy of his administration. It was mentioned quite a few times, but Joe Biden has taken front and center stage. So at this juncture, it's not clear. Trump is very transactional. He can change on anything. He always, expands the bookends. He says, I'm good friends with Xi Jinping, and then he attacks everything that is Chinese. So going forward, very difficult to see how this would resolve, because there's a lack of trust, not only the one that's been alluded to domestically, but internationally as well. And that goes not just for China, but for the neighbors in Mexico, Canada, all the allies in Europe, and around the world. No one knows exactly what he's going to do. He's certainly a very able reality TV presenter. You saw him marshal women, minorities, and immigrants to the defense of basically a block of voters, which in the main part are white men. So he will continue to hold out hope about a sudden miracle, a cure, that the economy is going to turn around, because he has no choice.
Okay, Einar, I appreciate your time. John, yours as well. Joel, Mary, all of you. If we'd have had less than a spirited debate, I would have been disappointed. And that does it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Sean Caleb's in Washington. Thanks, everyone, for being with us.